Lisa here. Welcome back to my channel. Welcome to the 31 Days of Tarot. If you don't already know or you haven't caught the earlier videos yet, this is a series of prompts that Ethany puts out. I will link her channel and her list of prompts in the cards and in the description box down below, or one or the other. But today we are talking about the books I read in 2019. I hope you have something to drink, a snack, maybe a pillow in case you get sleepy, because we are gonna be here for a bit. I read so many books, and I'm not even gonna talk about them all because we would be here way too long, because I usually read the guidebooks of all the new decks that I work with pretty much cover to cover every single week. There's some exceptions, but I usually do that, so there's been a lot. I've picked some standouts to share with you. I'm gonna dive right in because we just need the time. We need me to get started. So first off, I want to talk about, which one do I want to talk about first? Oh, you know what? We're going to start here. Okay, I can do this. Tarot Spreads by Barbara Moore. This is a fantastic book. This is basically a book of spreads, but it's a lot more than that, because the first whole chunk of the book is basically about teaching you how to develop your own tarot spreads. And this was great because this book really gave me the confidence to start playing with my own spreads and to think about how I was gonna position the cards. I guess I thought that tarot spreads were a little more happenstance, helter-skelter. What is the word I'm looking for? I swear my words have gotten weird lately, but all over the place. I don't know what the right word is, but I guess maybe accidental, like, oh, just lay out some cards in a shape, it's fine. But this book talks about how to be mindful about how you're laying out the cards. And actually, shortly after reading this book, I developed my trajectory tarot spread, which is one of my go-tos for client readings. I really love it because it speaks to the way that I read predictively, which is very much about sort of the direction you're headed based on your current choices. And it kind of helps to remind my clients that you can definitely change that trajectory. You just need to change the way that you're moving forward so that you start to move in a slightly different direction. So it gives you some power and some control back. But I got the confidence to create that spread after reading this book. Barbara Moore is one of my favorite tarot authors. I love the guidebooks that she contributes to and that she writes. I enjoy her style. She's very easy to read. She doesn't feel like she's talking or writing over my head, which I really appreciate. And it just makes for a comfortable reading experience for me. I love her stuff. And this was the book of hers that I read in 2019. Probably not counting many guidebooks that she wrote that I also read. The other book that I read in 2019 was the Marseille Tarot Revealed by Yoav Bendov. I won't say that this was a fantastically easy read, but it wasn't so bad, and it basically just teaches an approach to the Marseille Tarot, which is really useful. I also like that the second half of this book essentially serves as a guidebook for Marseille decks. So if you're a little bit lost with Marseille, but you want to work with a book, this is a great one. You can grab any Marseille deck, and I said that weird, any Marseille deck, and you can pull your cards and flip to whatever the page is in this book that's talking about those cards, and it will help you to interpret them in a spread. Marseille Tarot does have its own system. You don't have to use a Marseille system. You can use whatever system that you want when you're reading any deck that you want. But this was really, really helpful to me. So that was one that I enjoyed reading in 2019. I also read a book called Tarot Court Cards for Beginners. I can't remember the author's name off. I think it was Lisa Robertson. I don't have that one. I did end up rehoming that book. It was not my favorite book on the tarot court. But I did also pick up Ethany Dawn's Your Tarot Court. This book, so good. I have another book on the tarot court, I believe by Mary Kay Greer, and I may have another contributor as well that's up on my shelf, but I haven't read it yet. This book, amazing. I think there's been a lot of comparisons of this book to Kitchen Table Tarot by Melissa Sinova, which was a book I read last year, 2018, but I think that's because Ethany does a spectacular job of making the court cards feel approachable, of humanizing them and demystifying them, and just making them very, very, very memorable. This is a workbook, and I did use it as a workbook, so I've got my scrawl all the way through here. She also signed my copy in person, and I also got a book plate from her because I wasn't sure if I was going to see her to get it signed. Book plate. So I have it signed in multiple places because Why the heck not? But I really thoroughly enjoyed this book. There's a ton of examples, there's tons of exercises, but what I found really valuable was the nicknames she gave each of the court cards. If you don't know what I'm talking about, pick up a copy of the book. It will inform the way that you work with the court cards forever in a really great way. And love this. This was probably, of all the books I read this year, this is probably my number 1 or 2. It was super impactful to my practice. Another book that I picked up this year was Melissa Sanova's second book, the sequel, I guess you could say, not sequel. It's not a sequel. It was the book she wrote after Kitchen Table Tarot, but this is called Tarot Elements. This is a really great book to pick up if you are looking for a way to build a more personal development, life coaching kind of relationship with your cards. This focuses on 4 elemental spreads. I guess there's 5 because I think there's also a spirit. 5 elemental spreads that are designed to help you upgrade your life. And so it's got a very sort of personal self-help, personal growth kind of feel. It's got a lot of anecdotes throughout here about Melissa's own experiences and about her life. It's an entertaining and engaging read. Loved this. I also really appreciated and did not expect there to be a full book, essentially, of tarot card meanings in the back. And these meanings are written with the emphasis on that personal growth kind of feels, so that when you're using the elemental spreads she teaches you in this book, those meanings, if you use them to refer to, play into that particular approach to the tarot very well. This is really a great book. Enjoyed reading this. Would recommend it for sure. And it's sort of something to sink your teeth into, particularly if you're newer to the tarot and you want to kind of create something more meaningful than just sort of that fortune tellery feel. You want to create something more meaningful than just a daily draw. This gives you something to sort of build on, and I think that's really cool. Excuse me. I haven't finished this book, but holy moly has this one been impactful for me this year. I am working my way through Mary K. Greer's Tarot for Yourself. This is the 2nd edition. I believe a 3rd edition came out this year, so I can't speak to that version. This is very much a workbook. I am very much working my way through this, and boy, does it have a lot to offer. I have to say that one of the coolest things for me is the section where it has you map out all of your year cards from birth through like as far as the chart goes. I think I've got mine mapped out through like, I think my age 70 something. Let's see. I'm mapped out through age, 59 I guess on this chart. Through 59. I am not 59. But there's a dense section in this workbook where you go through what significant life events happened at different points in your life and what your year cards were those years. It also has you look at 10-year cycles, because what you'll discover if you get this book and you do this charting for yourself is you'll discover that there are these cycles where you get 10 cards and then it sort of starts back up and then you get 10 cards, and it's hard to describe. But what's interesting is that this year was the end of a very significant 10-year cycle for me personally, and doing these exercises in the book and getting familiar with what those cycles were and what significant events happened when has actually helped me to recognize some interesting patterns in my life and to recognize the importance of certain significant years. Holy moly, is this book full of really good stuff. My copy I got signed last year, or yeah, 2019, at the Northwest Tarot Symposium, and I just really treasure this book. I can't wait to get through the rest of it. It's full of great stuff. Highly recommend, especially if you want to develop that personal relationship with your cards. Okay, so we're 9 minutes in and I only have 4 more books to talk about. But this is it for sort of my general books, I would say, like my not deck specific books. Those are the ones that I read this year. I feel like there was others. Well, there was that Tarot Court Card for Beginners. I feel like there was others. Oh, I also read one on the connection between Mary Magdalene and the Tarot Trumps. I left it on my shelf, so I can't show you. But that was kind of cool. That was a short read. I found that at a used bookstore this summer. Okay, moving right along. Let's talk about some of my favorite tarot guidebooks that I read this year. I read so many, and it was hard for me to narrow it down, but I wanted to talk about these because they're very unique. So the first one I want to talk about is the Druidcraft Tarot Guidebook. And this is a little bit old hat, but I read it this year. And I got some really fantastic spreads out of this book that have become a part of my personal practice, and I've put them into or copied them into my personal spread collection that I keep for my own use and for use with clients. But also just the way that this book approached the tarot, I really, really enjoyed. I've also been using this book in my tarot memoir series, which I will link the playlist up in the cards. I've been using this for the minor arcana. I didn't use this through the majors, but I love the numerological associations that this book has. If you have been looking at tarot numerologically, if you're starting to dip your toe into Marseille or Pip decks, the numerological references in this deck, in this book, even though this deck is not a Pip deck, the numerological references in this one are super, super good, and they will definitely help you to wrap your head around some basic numerology and tarot. I just found that in the beginning of every single set of numbers, because it's organized numerologically, you would get this really wonderful page or two about that number and how that number sort of shows up in the tarot. And I found this so helpful. So this was a big one. Another guidebook this month, or this past year, that I really geeked out on is the Alice Tarot Guidebook by Baba Studios. This book is written by Karen Mahoney, and the artwork for the deck itself is done by Alex Ukalov. I always mess up his name. This is such a fantastic guidebook. What made this exciting for me was not only how detailed it went into the actual Alice Tarot itself, but the fact that this helps you to wrap your head around how every single card in this deck depicts an important scene or a part of the actual story of Alice in Wonderland from the books. So not the Disney movie necessarily, the Lewis Carroll books. And to make you connecting those dots even easier, there is an abridged version of the stories of both Alice in Wonderland and Through the Looking Glass in this guidebook, which was a super exciting, happy surprise when I got this. So there's abridged versions of both Alice books in this deck, or sorry, in this book. So from page 219 through to 284, those books are in there, which meant that not only could you, and sorry, this gets me very excited. Not only are the abridged copies of the stories there, but they have inserted thumbnails of the cards wherever they actually show up in the stories. This was such a cool thing to do, because what makes this deck so spectacular is that it is based on the Alice in Wonderland stories, that it depicts those scenes, but if you're just flipping through the cards, you might not know where they kind of fit in, and being able to just find them in the story and like refer to them as you're reading the stories just made them come alive in a way that was really cool. So I loved this. I read it cover to cover. Highly, highly recommend. If you get the Alice Tarot, I think it's still available. I will link it down below. But if you get the Alice Tarot, get the guidebook. You will not regret it. It is an extra purchase cost because the deck doesn't come with the guidebook automatically. Super worth it. Another guidebook that I just have to mention for 2019 is The Book of Pandas by Kimberly San. Kimberly San is Fable's Den here on YouTube. I will link her channel up in the cards. She took guidebooks and all of the rules, supposed rules about guidebooks, and she chucked them out the window when she wrote this, and she created something special and amazing, and I freaking loved it. And you can see I've still got like all these little tabbies in this book. Love this. For starters, the Way of the Pandas tarot is beautiful, and I loved working with it this year. It is definitely one of my favorites for 2019, but I have a lot of favorites and there were limited spots. So I didn't mention it in my top 5, but definitely one of my favorites. And this is one of the things that really set it apart. The language in here, the narrative style, the way that she writes, it literally made me laugh, made me smile. It was like reading a novel, except it wasn't. It was so sweet and pure and authentic. And I think that's what made this cool, is that Kim really made this hers. She made it her book. It stands out, it is extremely memorable, and I hope that more guidebook creators throw the rule books out and do that. There have been some other guidebooks that have done that successfully, but this one I think is just top bar for setting the bar? That's what I mean to say. Setting the bar for how to do that, because it's wonderful. How do I describe this? It's literally like, okay, let's see if I can nutshell. In the guidebook, you will discover that every panda pictured in the Way of the Panda Tarot has a name and a personality. And every single card will let you know a little bit about that card's personality or that panda's personality. It's written as if you're getting to know the actual pandas in this world. And there are these great fun little snippets, like a message from the Queen of Cups. And it's as if the Queen of Cups panda is actually writing this. Her name is Penelope. It's wonderful. There are spreads for every single major arcana card. This deck, you guys, for starters, the art is wonderful on the deck itself. The deck is really well thought out, but this book, it was a pleasure to read, and I read the entire thing and I could not put it down. Super fun. Highly recommend. If you've been thinking about this deck, this book, it's a must-have. And again, it's an add-on purchase, super worth every penny. And finally, I have Ethany to thank for this. This is the Wild Messengers Alchemical Tarot Guidebook. Ethany had an extra copy of this guidebook, which she very generously gifted to me, and I thought this would be great because I wasn't sure I wanted the tarot deck, but the book looked really interesting. I was flipping through it at a get-together we were at, and I was like, this looks really, really interesting. So I started reading the guidebook, and I started reading just a random page every single night before bed, and I fell in love. This guidebook takes a really powerful personal growth and self-worth approach to every single card. Excuse me. What's really special is that it's an animal deck, but it's more than that because there's this alchemical layer of understanding, of growth, and of trying to find that philosopher's stone of personal spiritual evolution. And I'm really doing a crap job of explaining it, you guys, but it is so, so, so good. This guidebook completely blew me away, and it's just become something that is one of my most treasured possessions. It was because of this guidebook that I actually contacted the creators and said, can I just buy just the deck? Because I already have the book, but now I need the cards too, it's funny because in this case, I feel like the cards are a way for me to work with the book versus the book being a way to help me work with the cards. The cards are like the accessory to this beautiful book. Not to mention, it is literally beautiful. Look at this holographic wonderfulness. There's also an entire section in the back of this book which talks about the alchemical process, and that is part of what piqued my interest in alchemy, and I have this book to thank. So this is amazing. And that is the last book I'm going to talk about in this prompt because otherwise we'll be here all day. And there were so many books in 2019. I would love to hear what you've been reading in 2019. What were some of your standout favorites, whether they're tarot guidebooks or tarot books or general books about your practice? What things sort of blew you away, or what were your sort of, what do you call it? Dark horses? The surprises, right? Let me know. If you want to book a reading with me, you can do that over at supportivetarot.com. And remember to like, share, subscribe, and I will see you all in the next one. Bye!